Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to the Horus Heresy lore breakdown. We are still on book number 23, The Angel Exterminatus, and this is definitely going to be a four-parter in all due likelihood. Last time we left our loyalist heroes aboard the Sisypheum with a little bit of a problem. Thaumatica, the Iron Priest, had tried to re-engineer his experiment to violate all laws of physics and reality and so on, and to help him in doing this, he had siphoned off practically all of the Sisypheum's energy. Yes, that was a lot of energy. He succeeded in not making the ship simply disappear in a slowly expanding cloud of radioactive dust, but all of the energy was then subsequently vented by the vessel's emergency systems, which means that all of the energy of a massive spacefaring vessel was pumped directly out into the void, where a massive enemy fleet was currently following them. Oh, they noticed, all right. Oh, they noticed. There's a short period of panicked conversations when they try to figure out if the enemy could have noticed, because of course they're not traveling through real space, and so they confront Carucci Vora about whether or not the traitors could have noticed this. And, he gives a little bit of a roundabout retard knife ear answer, like, oh, it's like saying how far is dream away from reality. At which point, the captain of the Iron Hands vessel gives him a little bit of a slap and tells him that he doesn't need no fortune cookie nonsense, he just wants to know if he's about to be shot at. At which point, the Eldar gives the answer he always should have given. Yes! Fucking Eldar, I swear to God. For one dramatically convenient moment, the Auspex readings aboard the Sisypheum clears, revealing a ginormous fleet of enemy vessels just right behind the Loyalists' craft. Dramatically convenient indeed. Meanwhile, the traitors, again, yes, they have indeed noticed, and they're currently asking them the question, who the hell is this and why, by the God Emperor's slowly tightening buttocks, are they here? An interesting question, but in many ways also a somewhat immaterial one. Peterabo decides that it's going to have to wait until after the enemy vessel has been dealt with, and immediately orders the Iron Blood to move forward in the formation and destroy the offending vessel, which he has already, somehow, managed to identify as an Iron Hands ship. Presumably because of what happened, I don't know, when Fulgrim got shot, I guess? Probably, maybe, possibly. Peterabo also notices a second ship as well, apparently hiding in the storm and abandoning the Sisypheum. But, we don't really get to see much more of this ship, so who the hell knows what it was? I'm assuming that is simply something that will pop up further down the line at some point. However, there is a little bit of a problem, you see. This is an Iron Hands vessel. An Iron Hands vessel. And who is nearby that tends to have a little bit of a problem with the Iron Hands? Yes, indeed. Peterabo, as he gives the instructions to close with the vessel and destroy it, he receives a call from Fulgrim, who states that he is readying boarding torpedoes, and seems outright shocked when Peterabo states that no, he just wants to destroy it, something that Fulgrim does not agree with at all. He wishes to humble these warriors of the Iron Hands like he did their Primarch. And even though Peterabo keeps insisting, no, I'm going to shoot it, Fulgrim simply orders his flagship, the Andronicus, to move in front of the Iron Blood, blocking the Iron Warrior's shot and launching boarding craft. understanding that the only way to fire upon the Loyalist ship now would also be hitting the Andronicus, which would almost certainly sour relations between the two traitor legions quite drastically. Peterabo gives the order that the Iron Warriors will join in the assault as well. They are too far away for boarding pods, however, so they are going to be using teleportation tech inside of the Eye of Terror. I mean, they're inside of webway portals, so it kind of works, but still, that doesn't sound like a particularly good idea, but oh well. Details. Meanwhile, on the Emperor's Children side of things, they are of course preparing the assault immediately. And Fabius is also bringing along his brand new pets, the Terrators, his various experiments from combining, Space Marines with anything and everything he had lying around, really. They are described in this beautiful fashion as if he has pretty much just stapled anything and everything he had onto the bodies of Space Marines. With a certain degree of experimentation, of course, like he checks if, okay, does this work? And it kind of seems like it works, so let's go with that. Let's give this one double-jointed legs. Let's give this one ginormous mantis arms. And let's replace this one's heart with something else, vaguely heart-shaped. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And it does kind of work out as well, and it's clear that he's been thinking this through a fair bit. These monsters are loaded into boarding torpedoes and then fired towards the Loyalist vessel. Now, immediately, the first problem one might have is these things were Loyalists. And so if you shoot them at a Loyalist vessel, maybe they will go, you know what? I don't want to kill these people. I want to kill the cunts that did all of this horrible shit to me. And that would undoubtedly be a little bit of a problem for Fabius, seeing as, he is one of the people who did that shit to them. And he probably doesn't want to get torn apart by his own creations. That sounds downright problematic, to be honest. So he has come up with a rather brilliant solution. The inside of the boarding pod is lined with special dispensers, and this is in all due likelihood specifically this pod, since all of the other Emperor's Children avoided it like the plague. No matter how interested they might be to get into contact with the enemy, they were not going to be anywhere near Fabius and his nonsense. Oh no. And these dispensers pump the room inside of the boarding torpedo full of some form of a combat stimulus of some sort that drives them even deeper into a maddened rage and insanity, to the point that the only one that actually manages to maintain some level, some level of sense of self, is Felix, the Imperial Fist's captain. Yes, indeed. He's still there, and he's still somewhat aware of what he's doing. Somewhat. He managed to keep a hold of his senses a while into the fight, but as he gets locked in combat with an Iron Hand, the Iron Hand tries to kill him because it looks like a bloody monster, and that finally deprives Felix of whatever sense of self he might still have had, and he ends up killing the Iron Hands, which finally drives him properly into madness, of course. Kind of tragic, really. Genuinely kind of tragic, yeah. Felix is trying so hard to find a way to fight back, a way to resist, and in the end, he's just been butchered to such an extent that even the fists can't resist, Nasty, nasty nonsense. Our hero for the remainder of this part is Lucius, actually. Lucius is also, of course, coming along with the Iron Warriors, the Emperor's Children boarding parties, as excited as anyone else to get to grips with the enemy. Although he is also intelligent enough to know that maybe he should hang back a little bit to begin with. Let some of the cannon fodder run in first, and get the enemy's attention. That seems like a good idea. He only goes in after his friends have drawn a suitable quantity of the enemy's bolter fire. You could say many mean things about Lucius, absolutely, but he's not dumb, now is he? That's for damn sure. But he also mentioned something a little bit interesting. He talks about how when he is hit by bolter fire, it feels strange, as if his armor is becoming a living part of him, and he feels its pain. Now, this, of course, is a thing that will be a very big part in Lucius' further story, but it's a little bit too early to get to that just yet. He then ends up in one-on-one combat with the Raven Guard, Shadow Queen, who actually, it seems, might be able to outmatch even the swordsman Lucius. And I love how he reacts to it. At one point, he literally just drops his guard in amazement, like, "You wounded me? I didn't even know that was possible anymore." I really like that. That is the Lucius I enjoy the most. The absolute swagger of this cocksure motherfucker. That's the best part of him. That is absolutely the best part of Lucius, in my opinion. And he almost meets his end here due to his overconfidence. But before the Raven Guards get any chance to finish the swordsman, Peterabo appears in a brilliant flash of teleportation energy. He immediately lays into the remaining iron hands and clears the embarkation deck. Thusly, with a foothold secured, the warriors of the traitors begin flooding on board the Sisypheum in huge numbers. But the Iron Warriors are not done yet. They have fought such battles before and will probably do so again, as they fall back in good order, establishing choke points, welding shut blast doors, and preventing the enemy from launching a swift follow-up assault. Peterabo even muses over the fact that he understands how this works. He knows that right now his best option is to move with such speed and ferocity as to overwhelm any enemy resistance before it gets a chance to truly form. And yet, he hesitates. He waits. He doesn't immediately order up breaching teams, and a great deal of the reason why is because he too has seen the Terrators. He has seen what Fabius has done to these one's allies. And, even worse, he has seen that not only are there Iron Hands and Salamanders amongst the Terrators, there are even sons of Horus. And once again, we need to remember that at this particular point in time, Peterabo still believes that he is loyal to a cause. He still believes that he is fighting for an honorable man, someone who has ideals. He has a personal loyalty to Horus, and that does stem from a place of honor, I suppose we should say, within Peterabo's cold, dead little heart. In his mind, what he is doing is just and, well, correct. He has a rationale for doing this, rather than Fulgrim, who's doing this at this point because funny, essentially. And since he is still pure, when he sees such abominations rampaging across the deck of the Loyalists, well, what Peterabo sees is his allies being literal monsters, and the enemy being apparently the noble warriors, fighting with distinction, with bravery and determination, again, against what appears to be a savage, horrible foe, Little different from the Xeno species Peterabo once culled. He's starting to have some serious doubts about his allies. But before we get to his conclusion on this matter, we take a little bit of a sidestep over to Fabius Bile, who has detected a strange energy signature aboard the Loyalist vessel, which he has never seen the likes of before, and so, obviously, he wants it. Makes sense, certainly. And it is in the Apothecarium, right? So it's probably the heart of iron then, keeping the captain alive. Interesting. He also gives a quick mention of how the Territor appear to be falling apart. Their supercharged biology outpacing their ability to replenish it. Now, in Fabius's calculations, the energy-rich gruel that he is feeding them should be enough to keep them fueled and keep them alive, and yet, as reality is ever so clearly demonstrating, that is not the case. He considers for a moment that perhaps this is due to some flaw in the Alpha Legion's information that he received. But he immediately discards that. He immediately dismisses it and goes like, no. None amongst the Alpha Legion are smart enough to trick me. No, this must be a mistake of my doing. And so he simply just looks forward to fixing it. Fucking hell. His ego, like, so this is the explanation why Fabius has never managed to do what a certain cogboy did over the course of a long weekend? His fucking ego? I mean, it makes a certain degree of sense, I suppose, but after 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years, you'd think he would eventually start to reassess his situation, like, oh shit, nothing works. Maybe I should reconsider the idea that the Legion famous for treachery might have fucked me over somehow. Oh well. And sadly for Fabius, this is just not his day, as he also gets screwed out of the heart of iron. He does make it to the Apothecarium without being intercepted or noticed. Dramatic license, never mind. But once there, he is momentarily stopped by the apothecary himself, guarding, of course, the stasis casket of the Iron Hand's captain. And whilst Fabius and his Territor overcome the immediate resistance, well, they bring in a dreadnought and the Raven Guard as well, and swiftly chase off Fabius whilst killing his more, stable Territors, one of which is even, amazingly enough, capable of speech, which that shows you just how far Fabius is away from creating the new Ubermensch, isn't it? So Fabius, poor bastard, has been denied his price, but at the very least he has been able to see his Territors in actual action, so he's had some new data to mull over in his workshop. Of course, the fact that he's missed the obvious reason why his creations are failing so miserably, well, that's a problem for another day. Meanwhile, Peterabo is still hesitating. In fact, he even orders that breaching charges already placed shall not be detonated. The Iron Warriors will not be opening up a path for further advancement into the Loyalist vessel, nor will they be making any headway for the Emperor's children to follow up. When asked why this is the case, because of course he knows, as does his warsmiths, that every moment they waste here is an extra moment granted to the Iron Hands to reinforce, to rally, to prepare their defenses, and turn the ship into an absolute murder field for the invaders. And Peterabo quite simply states that he knows this. He is letting them prepare. He is giving them a last stand. He states that looking at the Territors, looking at the monsters created by the Emperor's children, this was not a clean fight. It was not a fair fight. It was not an honourable fight, and therefore he feels obliged to grant the Iron Hands, well, a good sending off. At this point in time, Peterabo has more in the way of sympathies for the Loyalists than he does both the Emperor's children, obviously, and even his own warriors right now. But then something convinces him to make a hasty retreat. You see, the Iron Warriors are apparently overcharging their engines. This was a report sent from the Iron Blood to the warsmiths nearest to Peterabo, who then informed him that it appears as if the Iron Warriors were preparing to overload their generators, detonating them and the entire ship, killing everyone aboard, and probably some of the ships nearby as well, in the bargain. At first, Peterabo says that no, this is a bluff. He knew Ferus Manus, and he knew his legion. They would not choose to go out this way. But he's eventually convinced by his warsmiths that no, they would. Ferus Manus is dead. This is no longer the legion that Peterabo knew, and even if it was, they have a chance to kill an enemy Primarch. The cost of a single loyalist vessel and its crew is next to nothing compared with such a prize. And that is enough to convince Peterabo. He orders for the Iron Warriors to begin their retreat, to teleport back to the Iron Blood, but he does not share the information with the Emperor's children. He states that they will be made to pay for dragging him, and of course themselves, into this needless boarding action. Peterabo will withdraw, and then he will destroy the Sisypheum with the Iron Blood's guns. And if the Andronicus just happens to be in the way, well, too bad for the Andronicus. But once Peterabo gets back aboard the Iron Blood, he notices some strange discrepancies in the Sisypheum's generator readings. It is too small for anyone else to notice, but Peterabo immediately spots the pattern. And indeed, aboard the Iron Hand's vessel, Dramatica is in communication with the captain, who has at this point pretty much figured that, okay, Dramatica is trying to blow the ship to kill the traitor Primarch along with them. Fair enough. Go ahead. It sucks, but it's worth it. But when Dramatica finally actually makes contact with the bridge, he requests that all operational control over the engines and the ship be sent down to his control terminal. At first, Captain Tyro refuses, stating that the last action of this ship will not be handed over to Dramatica, especially not after he basically killed it by revealing them to the enemy fleet. But then Dramatica shoots back that he is not going to kill them. Indeed, if he gets control, he might just see them alive through this yet. And that is what Peterabo has spotted. The Sisypheum is not powering up to self-detonate. It is powering up, and this is impossible, by the way, to shoot all of its energy out through the engines, therefore accelerating the massive vessel forward immediately and slamming straight through the Andronicus whilst firing its prow-mounted weaponry, slicing the Emperor's Children vessel in half and de facto annihilating it. And Peterabo knows. And Peterabo refuses to tell anyone else about what's going to happen. He even instructs the rest of his Iron Warriors to not fire on the Iron Hand's vessel. Because, well, he wants to hurt Fulgrim. He wants to hurt the Emperor's children. And he frankly doesn't give too much of a shit about whether or not Fulgrim survives the punishment that he is intending to unleash upon him. And so, the Iron Hand's vessel does just that. All of the energy is rerouted to the engines, and in one massive blast, it propels the ship straight through the Andronicus, out the other side, and off at escape velocity. Now again, this is impossible. This is not how spacefaring vessels work. You can't just take all of that energy that would normally blast the ship apart, point it out backwards and go like, right, that'll fix it. No. And here's the thing too. space, there is gravity in space. Not a lot of it. It's an absolutely minuscule amount, but there is gravity in space, which means that there is friction in space. Now again, there's not a whole lot, but taking a vessel the size of this, a ginormous spaceship, and having it go from 0 to 1 billion kilometers an hour, like that, bad idea. And impacting upon another vessel like the Andronicus, which is probably even bigger and more heavily armored, should see both of them atomized in the bloody collision. But, dramatic license and all that. And so, the Loyalists make their escape. Their ship is battered 7 ways to Sunday, absolutely, and indeed, the traitors don't even know if they survived at all, but, spoilers, they did. And the Andronicus is a spinning, drifting, blasted wreck. And even after that punishment, Peterabo still hasn't settled his shit with Fulgrim. Remember back in the Apothecarium after they brought over the quite severely stoned Iron Warrior? Yeah, this wasn't enough punishment. He still has that separate issue to settle with Fulgrim. Oh, Peterabo. You are a petty little shit, are you not? But hey, at least he allows the rescue efforts to go forward, and in the end, the Iron Warrior saved 3,000 souls from the wreck of the Andronicus, so it's something. And we now also get a very interesting look into Peterabo's early history. This is probably one of the most important points in the entire book, honestly. Peterabo describes an event where he is climbing a tower on Terra, and this is some form of test. He describes the climbing of the tower as a mental communion with the Emperor, until he then finally emerges at the top of the tower and has a conversation with Big E before he heads out into the galaxy to begin conquering it in the name of humanity. And one of the foremost lessons that the Emperor wishes to impart onto Peterabo is that he must use his allegiance with care. The sin of an unjust war, he says, is an unbearable one, and one that should be avoided at all cost. Interesting. It seems as if Peterabo certainly did not take that lesson to heart. He also talks about how the Imperium has to do this. This is not a choice. They must fight evil. Peterabo seizes upon the usage of the word evil, and the Emperor insists it is but a turn of phrase, still of course keeping the true nature of chaos secret from his sons. In the case of Peterabo, perhaps it would have been better not to do so, because armed with the certainty of that knowledge, Peterabo would probably have remained loyal. Because at the end of the day, the Emperor did nothing wrong. Oh well, I'm sure he did some things wrong, but when it comes to the idea of fighting chaos actively throughout the galaxy, by establishing a human rule over that very galaxy, one built upon secular beliefs and the rejection of worships of any and all creatures, regardless of their creed or their type, that is probably the only true weapon that humanity has against chaos. Humanity is not like the Eldar, and even then, the Eldar at the very height of their empire, when they wielded the forces of chaos like tools, essentially, even they themselves, the ancient glorious Eldar Empire, collapsed, and in doing so even gave birth to a brand new chaos god. That way lies madness. The only way humanity has to defeat chaos is to eradicate it. At the very least, that is the Emperor's idea, and I would certainly agree with him. He also mentioned something that at first comes across as a very throwaway-ish line, when he talks about how others have tried to fight evil before, using things like good works or prayers, but we will not do that. We will fight evil with our bolters and the courage of our warriors. Now, at first too, I thought, like, okay, well, that's just a reference to old school religiosity, etc., that was a way to fight evil. Okay, that makes sense. Because it was, it was an idea. Oh, we are good because we are religious. We are righteous because we have faith, and so on. But what if that is not merely a throwaway line? What if that is a reference to an actual attempt made during the golden age of technology, during the Human Federation? What if they tried to fight chaos with good works and religion, and that may even have been the very thing that led to the collapse of the Human Federation? Again, we know so little about that period of 40k history that, it's all pretty much groundless speculation, but the Emperor would have been around during those times. So if anyone would know, it would be him. More directly, interestingly, is also how he talks to Peterabo, how he tells him that, the burden of an unjust war is one that no man should bear, and urges Peterabo to only use his legions when necessary. He flat out tells him that he should be very careful in how he employs the forces that will now be at his command. He should make sure that he is attacking the correct target. And Peterabo even answers him with a paraphrasing, I would assume, of his beloved Firenze polymath, that they must leave the galaxy a better place after they have conquered it. It's very interesting because, again, we return to the whole thing. Oh, the Emperor abused the Iron Warriors. They turned against him because they were betrayed. They were abused. The Emperor, from the very beginning, apparently urged Peterabo to show restraint, urged Peterabo to build, urged Peterabo to not engage in unjust wars. How, then, did Peterabo arrive at the conclusion that he should burn and annihilate anything in front of him? How, then, did he arrive at the conclusion that the only way to pacify Olympia was to annihilate its population? It seems so very, very strange. It seems so very, very strange. I also find it interesting that Peterabo is only now starting to reconsider this conversation, starting to re-examine it and look for secret messages. For example, Peterabo almost feels as if the Emperor knew what was going to happen, or at the very least had an inkling that the betrayal might be one of the possible futures. Which is also, again, very interesting. I maintain that the Emperor was probably a far more forgiving parent than he should have been. If he had dealt harshly with Lorgar, the entire thing could have been avoided. If he had dealt harshly with Angron immediately, that would have been another problematic avenue averted. If he had dealt even more harshly with Magnus and go like, no, I will put Custodes on you like I did Lorgar, again, the problem would have been averted. And yet, again and again, the Emperor gives his sons the benefit of the doubt. He lets them run rampant for far longer than what seems wise. And if, indeed, as Peterabo suspects, the Emperor had an inkling of what could happen, well, even more so. If he thought this was a possibility, if he thought this could be a future in which Peterabo betrayed him, and yet he still raised him up, he still appointed him his hammer, he still trusted him. The Emperor may certainly not have been the perfect father, but one of the ingredients of that is that he did not treat his sons harshly enough when that was required. And since I am different than the Emperor, and I am willing to treat my sons ever so harshly, here's a commercial break. And with that out of the way, once again, we return. Fulgrim finally arrives after having been summoned by Peterabo 5 hours ago, but this was a slight that the Lord of Iron had expected. Oh, Fulgrim. Seems he's beginning to figure out his brother after all. Now that Fulgrim doesn't have anything he immediately wants from Peterabo, he's fine with taking his time once more. Not too much of a surprise, I suppose, considering Fulgrim's own proclivities as of late. Though, before we get into the chastisement, there is one interesting little thing that happens first, which is a bit of a side thing, but it is in reference to one of Graham McNeil's other characters. Honourable Solaka, a member of the Dodecatheon, the Mason's Lodge in the Iron Warriors, ventures into the parts of the ship that have been given over to the survivors of the Andronicus. He finds no Imperial Children apothecaries seeing to the wounded, of which there are more than plenty. There are warriors there that would die without immediate expert care, and yet the Emperor's children don't seem to be giving too much of a shit about that whatsoever. They don't seem to care at all that these warriors that could live would die without treatment. The reason why is made abundantly clear a little bit later on. Solaka finds one Emperor's Children legionnaire who dies at his very feet, passing away whilst extolling the virtues of dying, talking about how he never knew that dying could feel this good. That, of course, freaks Solaka out just a little bit. Unsurprisingly, if anything's a surprise, it's just it's the little bit part. You'd think he'd be more like, "Wow, this is terrible." But he then continues carrying out his duty as an apothecarian, and he claims the Legionnaire's gene seed, intending, in all due likelihood, to simply hand it over to the Emperor's children once he finds one of their apothecaries, someone he can entrust it to. But before he gets that far, he manages to extract the gene seed, and then Lucius arrives right behind him and asks if that is something that is really his to take, referring to the gene seed, and then informs the Honourable Solaka that Fabius is standing right behind him. I'm sure you can guess what happens next. The soft thud of a needle round piercing Solaka's neck and flooding him with a potent chemical cocktail that manages to overwhelm his defenses almost immediately, which is damned impressive in and of itself, considering he is still a space marine and they are rather resistant to most forms of toxins, but apparently not this mysterious concoction of I was about to say Fulgrim there, because the name slipped my mind all of a sudden. Fabius's creation. There you go. Fabius, that's the name I was looking for. He then gives Fabius a little bit of extra information, amongst other things, his name, Honourable Solaka, and Fabius then scrawls that name on a glass container, inside of which is Solaka's own gene seed, which Fabius just finished yoinking out of his chest. Yeah, Iron Warrior, I guess you shouldn't have tried to help your allies, should you? That was clearly a very bad idea, as it turns out. Now, the thing this is reference to is, we'll see it at the very end of the book, but Honourable Solaka will turn into Honsau, or Honsau, Graham McNeil's recurring character that we see amongst other works in Ultramarines and Storm of Iron. A little bit of a self-insert penis there, just like, oh, look at this, but neat nevertheless, I suppose. Now then, back to Peterabo's chastisement of his brother. Peterabo is sat working on a 40k model, of course, a miniaturized Warhound Titan that apparently possesses most, if indeed damn close to not all, the abilities of the real thing. Now, that is impressive in and of itself, no doubt. You know, a Warhound Titan model able to walk around firing little lasers, mayhaps, that's pretty damn awesome. And even more impressive is the fact that it is apparently powered by a perpetual motion generator at its heart. Right. Okay. That's some bullshit you just casually dropped on me there, book, but fine, I'll take it. Perpetual motion generator, right? Okay, yep, sure, fine, why not? Why the hell not? Absolutely. He begins chastising Fulgrim. Fulgrim's being a little bit contrite. He did just lose a warship, which Peterabo points out that he lost a warship unnecessarily, and so on. Fulgrim's not particularly interested in a lecture, however, and when he basically tells Peterabo to go fuck himself most ungently with a wrench, Peterabo says, how about you come a little bit closer, brother? How about you come over here? Come. See this Warhound? It's beautiful. It's pretty awesome. Like, you can hear its impossible heart ticking a little bit out of order. It fell off a shelf during the Battle of Foul. Why you wouldn't have this shit tied? Why was this incredible thing standing unsecured on a shelf, by the way? But details. I mean, warships tend to rock when they get hit by a weapon. No. I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm just gonna leave it there. So, Fulgrim just leans on in to hear the irregular beat of the Warhound's heart when Peterabo reaches out, takes a good grasp of Fulgrim's hair, and smashes his face into the Warhound Titan, annihilating it in the process. Ever since Peterabo's first official action was to decimate his legion, this has got to be the most pointlessly cruel and shitty thing that he has done, I swear to God. He then proceeds, of course, to beat the ever-living shit out of Fulgrim, whilst the Iron Circle moves to intercept Fulgrim's lieutenants, bash them to the floor, and the Trident leaps upon them and pins them down as well, whilst Peterabo continues beating the shit out of Fulgrim, throwing him around his workshop, eventually pinning him down, and raising his hammer up on high over Fulgrim's head. And then Peterabo begins to negotiate. Peterabo, I know, right? Negotiate from a position of strength. I get it, but this is a little bit too, a literal interpretation, I guess. But hey, it works. He then lays out his requirements. From now on, the entire expedition, including the Emperor's Children's forces, will be under Peterabo's de facto command. Only if Peterabo gets to have full control over the expeditionary force of both legions, and only if Fulgrim listens to Peterabo's orders and instructions, will the Iron Warriors go along with this expedition. Otherwise, Peterabo will simply turn his legion around and head back into real space, where he can contribute to the war more directly. The war that he is already missing out on now. Fulgrim bitches and whines a little bit, but eventually, surprisingly easily, accepts Peterabo's demands and goes along with them. Even his lieutenants simply just accept it. No posturing, no prancing, no shouts, no curses. They just go along with it. Peterabo is surprised, but apparently not intelligent enough to see a trap when it farts in his face. Hell, even one of the warsmiths points this out. A member of the Trident says, he basically points out the model like, I never liked it, but sad to see it destroyed in this way. And Peterabo asks him to speak his mind plainly. Do you believe that I should not have chastised my brother in this way? And he says, no. I think you were right to chastise him, but did you have to humiliate him? If you're going to skin a cat, you don't keep it around as a house pet afterwards. Wise words. Very wise words indeed. Peterabo might be brilliant, but when it comes to human relations, he is sorely lacking. Or perhaps he still believes that there is a spark of honor in Fulgrim. Well, good luck with that, Peterabo. And it's not long until the two legions, now on pseudo-friendly terms once again, reach their destination. A single world near the heart of the Eye of Terror. An Eldar Crone world. One of the original home planets of the mighty Eldar Empire at the very height of its power. A perfect sphere, suggesting that it was probably engineered by the Eldar. Peterabo and Fulgrim look out upon it and wonder what might be waiting for them down below. They ask Karuchi Vora, if he has any knowledge of its defenses, and, well, he doesn't know. Peterabo thinks he's lying, and he probably is. All he can say is that Storm was presumed to be the ultimate defense, though some scriptures also talk of an army of immortals. Now, anyone who knows anything about the Eldar probably already knows what that means, and Peterabo wants to make sure because he's a bit worried as well. He orders an orbital bombardment of the area surrounding the sepulchre where the Angel Exterminatus supposedly lies. Fulgrim is aghast at this, worried that Peterabo will damage what lies beneath. Interesting choice of terms. But Peterabo promises him that the Iron Warriors are plenty skilled enough to bombard the area without damaging the sepulchre. And then the Iron Warriors and Emperor's Children will make an advance upon their objective via land raiders and rhinos, crushing through any resistance after creating a baseline fortification from which to wage a potential long-term battle. Although no clear defenses are at the moment present, the entire planet appears to be covered in cities and spires and structures, but nothing that looks like obvious, at least, defensive emplacements. It is, however, soon made clear that the world is, well, not undefended, at the very least not completely, but also that its defenses are apparently not quite conventional. One of the first things they notice upon landing on the planet is that whilst it would usually take them an hour or so to circumvent their entire landing zone with pre-created fortifications, gun turrets, and bastions, in this case it takes the Iron Warriors 5 hours, and even after that, the walls are still not finished. At that point, the Iron Warriors simply say, fuck it. Nothing's attacking us, so let's go out and head towards the sepulchre. It is explained in such a way as to suggest that the ground of the world, the very fundament of it, the very substance of it, revolts against the Iron Warriors. When they create a foundation, it splits apart. It weakens. It begins to topple the walls placed upon it. And yet, when they try to reinforce it or remove it with fresh fundaments, it seems to suck into the ground and refuse to be moved. It is made very clear that this is basically an impossibility. The Dark Mechanicus, the Iron Warriors, the Warsmiths, all of the engineers and the leaders have no idea what's going on. It's also interesting how they constantly refer to the material as unknown, but Peterabo can speak Eldar. Does he not have any term for Wraithbone? I swear to God, there's been mentions of Wraithbones in the Horus Heresy before this, hasn't there? I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure it has been mentioned. I'm pretty sure that someone like Peterabo, who has undoubtedly probably fought the Eldar before, would be aware of this material. Or maybe they're suggesting that it's some strange offshoot material, not quite Wraithbone, some different structure or substance perhaps with different properties. Possible, I suppose. It might even suggest that the entire planet is basically a ball of Wraithstone of some sort, and that is why it can, well, react almost like a living entity to the attackers. It is also pointed out later on that the statues, that too, by the way, I forgot to mention that. The entire planet is covered in statues, many of them of artisans and workers and philosophers and thought leaders and so on, but a lot of them are also of warriors, which is interesting. How did that come to pass? Because surely this is a world. It's close to the Eye of Terror. It must have been one of the earliest worlds to have been overwhelmed by the spreading malaise of Slaanesh, right? And yet it seems to have been designed as a defensive bulwark. Interesting. Perhaps it was done, preemptively to defend the Angel Exterminatus. I suppose that's certainly possible, but they also use Wraithbone constructs to do so. It's all just a little bit odd with the timeline here. Anywho, the Emperor's children, Lucius specifically, they get bored quite easily, and so whilst the Iron Warriors are advancing upon the Sepulchre in 3 tridents, and the Emperor's children just kind of latch onto this because, why not? Lucius admires one of the statues of what sounds like a screaming banshee, and he begins to try to emulate their postures, their fighting styles, as he dances through the ruins and eventually slashes out his newly acquired whip from a dead Emperor's children, lashes it around the neck of one of the statues and slicing it clean off, revealing inside of the statue, as it simply just crumbles to dust, a small, softly glowing stone, which Lucius picks up, and he describes a sense of fear emanating from the stone, and once he has it in his hands, he feels it crystallizing into terror, and the stone shatters, giving Lucius a sense of energy, a burst of power, as he presumably in some way devours the soul, or perhaps his heightened senses simply somehow tastes the soul being eaten by she who thirsts. Considering the patron deity of the Emperor's children, that is far from impossible. Someone else who's nearby is Marius Verosian and his cacophony, who immediately, of course, get really interested. What was that? That was awesome. Can you do it again? And Lucius is like, well, there's rocks inside the statues, and so the Emperor's children go berserk, smashing everything to get at the rocks inside in an orgy of annihilation. Meanwhile, the Loyalists are nearby. The Iron Hands and their one Raven Guard ally is looking upon this orgy of destruction and not feeling anything, so clearly there's some kind of Slaneshi connection here, because the Iron Warriors also don't notice anything, and they're wondering what the hell is going on. They're apparently planning to launch some form of ambush upon the enemy's numbers, but this is called off, because up in orbit in the Sisypheum, Branton, their captain, is brought out of the stasis casket once more by an adventurous salamander apothecary who wants to try and figure out what the hell the Heart of Iron is doing to him, and if there would be any way to either speed up the process or slow it down, because currently the Heart of Iron appears to be killing Branton far quicker than it is healing him, even within the stasis field, which should mean, of course, any change is impossible. But Branton has been in some kind of psychic communion with the dead of the Eldar planet. And he now makes it very clear that no, screw the ambush, they need to stop the Primarchs. They have to find a way into the Sepulchre through a different path and interrupt the ritual, the rebirth of the Angel Exterminatus, as he puts it. Now that is an interesting choice of words considering what's going to be happening next, but I think I'm going to wrap this one up right about there, because this should leave us with just about enough for a part 4, I think. So, till next time, I've been Arch, thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.